Hello, hello, namaste. Welcome to tonight's session. This is session number 3 in our career guide. This entire series is meant to be a guide on how you can get started with your creative career. Now, although this channel has been mainly UI UX design, what we talk about in this series should be applicable to you even if you're a different type of designer. Maybe you're a graphic designer, maybe you're a different kind of creator, maybe you're just exploring the space. This series will dive deep into some of the mindsets that typically hold us back. This series dives into what online education looks like. It's not watching videos alone, it's doing it together with a community. And today, we've got two people who are joining us, right? Jenil, who you already met yesterday. We're also going to have Sneha, who is joining us today. Sneha currently works, she's one of the partners at Prophecy, which is a design studio. Previously, Sneha and I actually worked together at Unacademy, and she was later the head of visual design and the head of design at Graphy after that. So we're going to have a very interesting session, right? Let me just tell you that upfront, because the thing we're going to be talking about today is a bit of a roadmap, right? A bit of a roadmap that helps answer this one simple question that to people who are already in design seems kind of obvious, but to everybody else, including me, when I got started in design, this was something that I had some kind of insecurity about, some kind of let's just say some kind of feeling. And the question is, can anybody become a designer? We might see the world as you're either born creative or you're not a creative person. There are so many stereotypes, right? कि ये तू creative है, तू तुम drawing करते थे उसमें, and there are a lot of people who consider themselves not creative. And I know a lot of these people, and a lot of them are amazing designers today, who might have had that as a misconception or something which was a running story in society, a running sort of stereotype that they didn't really question. Today, we're going to be questioning that, and we're going to be getting a bit of a balanced perspective. All of you know my perspective around this. Roughly, if you're here on this channel, you roughly know my story of how I got into design from a non-design degree. However, the balanced perspective that we're going to add today is we've got Jenil, who was in electrical or electronics. Jenil, I'll ask you the real thing. Who was in electronics, made a transition into a bunch of different careers. He was working on Linux most as a developer. He was a technical writer at some point, and now he's a designer and has been designing and teaching design for a good number of years now. We're going to have Sneha, who went down a different path from us, which is she actually went to design school. She went to NID Ahmedabad. That's where she did her design school along with the internships, that kind of community, that kind of design school mindset. But then she's been working in startups, very similar to me, not so similar to Jenil. Jenil has an amazing B2B experience, which maybe we can talk about today as well. We're going to be talking about this particular question: can anybody become a designer? With that, let me get some folks on. What's up, Jenil, and what's up,
Namaste,
Sneha?
everybody.
Hey.
Sneha, what's up? This is your first time on the show.
Yeah, nice to be here. Hi, everyone. Hello.
So, what we're gonna get started with, right? I'm gonna just pass over this mic, this this virtual mic in this session to Sneha. I want to get a little bit of an understanding of how did you, Sneha, how do you summarize your design career over the past um, past couple of years? Maybe before college, maybe you want to start after. What do you think?
Throughout, I mean, from the beginning, to be very honest, my design career has been a series of happy accidents. So I never intended to apply to design school. I applied to design school. I got into design school. I had a different intention of what I thought I wanted to do. I didn't end up doing that. I found what I was passionate about. I did that. I got a job at a place that I had no idea, I'd never heard of, and work with people uh, I did not know. I moved to a city I just visited once before. Uh, I mean, overall, and now Prophecy also, I just had a very um, open conversation with one of like my partners at Prophecy, and then that just kind of worked out. So, I mean, honestly, my entire career has been some chances, a whole lot of luck, and good fortune. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first question I want to ask you before we move further is you are from design school. Can you, what part of your creative career life today, what part of it do you attribute to design school and what part do you attribute to the experience you've had after, which is could be your internships, jobs, companies?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, definitely I think that when you learn design by yourself, there is this idea of what it means to design. And a big part of that is about making things. It's about a very skill based designing, let's call it. And I think that what I learned as part of being in design school, and overall because my mindset of what it means to be a designer was different from the beginning. Like I had a lot of um, those questions and those conversations with my peers and with people who have done this before at earlier stages. So it always so I don't I don't think about design is not a limited. The scope of design is very wide for me in terms of how I think it can be applied, and I think about it as a mindset and a way of thinking and a way of approaching any kind of problem or any kind of opportunity, rather than a certain set of skills or tasks.
Yeah.
And design school definitely made me uh, think very critically, which I
Hmm.
think is sometimes you lack when you don't have that kind of infrastructure of people who are cross questioning you about why you're doing what you're doing. When you are, the feedback loop is largely with yourself and with people who are at the same level as you, then it's hard to critically think
So let me
basically.
ask you this also,
Um,
right? You what exactly was your design degree? Like what was it called? The program?
so as soon as I joined, they changed the program from a diploma program to a degree. So it became Bachelor of Design,
Hmm.
and my specialization was within visual communication. It was graphic design was my specialization.
Hmm.
So I have a BDev degree.
Got it. And today the work you do, would you describe it as graphic design? Would you describe it as something else?
No, I mean graphic design is one part of it, and yeah, but largely I do a lot more thinking and more strategic work and more experiential work than I do uh, actual designing of graphics. If we just
Yeah. But give
use
me an
that
example. Give me
literal
an
term.
example of what are some things that you are designing, which, today, like, for, to give you some background, a lot of people here, when you say experiential work, I do more of this thing, they have no clue what you're talking about, right? Because for a
Sure.
lot of people, they started with maybe just Photoshop, maybe just Figma, Adobe XD, some of the tools, but now they realize that that's literally just the first step. So, what is beyond
Yeah.
the tools? What is this stuff that you do today?
Yeah. So I try to think about how design can influence the culture of an organization, of a brand, of a product. and but that's the experience, the total experience that the end user gets, right? So a screen might be one part of the experience, a poster might be one part of the experience, a logo might be one part of the experience, but these are all isolated things that designers are working on. But many a time they don't speak to each other and they don't speak to the larger objective of the design, of the experience. And that's what I'm concerned with, which is I'm trying to think about who are these people who you're designing for? Why should they care about what you're designing? And whether that be a poster or an app or whatever that thing might be, the final form might be something really tactile, might be something very small in the
Mm.
larger scheme of things. But how does it feel as a overall experience? How do you feel while using it? How do you feel while not using it? And I mean, there are great examples of good experiences like that that are very design led. Um, yeah, we can talk about an
Yeah.
example for everyone to relate with would surely be an example like Zomato is a great example, right? That the entire company, the everything that they do, uh, everything that they write, their notifications, their color palette, their typography, their posters, everything feels like it was done by the same person or at least the same group of people, which makes you feel like you're engaging with an individual and with a experience rather than a brand or something that is very transactional. It does not feel transactional with Zomato. You feel like you're part of this very um, interactive, very witty kind of person. You're just hanging out with this person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we would love to, I would love to also talk about this stuff, maybe not in today's session, but a lot of you have seen, for example, the Let's Crack It campaign. So Sneha was one of the designers behind that, working along with an agency. We will talk about that in future sessions though. But let me quickly get Jenny on as well. Jenny, I want to hear your story from the perspective of you did not go to design school. But my question that I want to start with is, did you know you wanted to be a designer? When was that earliest time for you?
Um, so I think for me, what was happening was I was already helping out a few of my friends in India. So there was this startup called Printer Joy, and we had raised some, Kickstarter type money. So I was helping them out with the design side of things while they were taking care of other things. So that's where I got involved with. The guy became the de facto design guy. So I was like, I'll helping them out with branding, telling the developer who is coding in Ruby on Rails, like this is how we should design it. Look at these websites and apps out there. This is what we need to do. And that's when I realized that okay, this is interesting. And like working as a developer and programming and stuff is good, but a lot of times it was more of like you knew what you had to do and you were mostly like sitting in your cubicle and doing that. And being an extrovert myself, I wanted something that was more like problem solving, interacting with clients, people facing. There's like a team based effort more. um, so that's when I was like, okay, I don't want to spend the rest of my life in this cubicle just coding, even if it's cool coding. I don't want to do that. So that's how I slowly got introduced to this, and I realized like, oh my god, you can actually get paid to. Uh, I used to do a lot of painting and drawing back in the day. So it was like, oh my god, like I get paid to like do this creative work, and that's where it was like, damn, this is
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very similar story in the part that I did not like to code, which is I realized sometime in college itself that coding is great. At its best, programming is amazing. I love that
Yeah,
feeling of trying to figure something out, going through this
yeah,
process, and eventually it works. But I could not see myself having a long term career in programming, although it's something that I
yeah,
enjoyed. And I think for me, it's a very similar thing. I don't really consider myself. a programmer as such, but I programmed today, right? Connecting to the thing which Sneha said, that although she started in graphic design, today she does
Mm-hmm.
stuff across, let's say, web design, posters,
Yeah,
brand identity, brand experience.
true.
But the
I
question
was
I want to then
actually
ask, okay, go on, yeah,
no, I was just like, it's like I was in Ahmedabad, and then Sneha was in Ahmedabad for college. So I was just kind of like, I never got to catch up with her on that. Like,
yeah,
where
yeah.
did you eat? Or what did you think about it and stuff? Or what years were you there? It could be that I was there and she was there. We didn't know each other at all.
What year was that, Sneha?
I was there from 2013 to 2018.
Okay. I had just left India back then. Okay. So yeah, I think I left and then you came.
So the question I want to ask both of you now, okay, this is like the sort of like the main question that I want people to very solidly have an answer, okay, by the end of this. And maybe we'll start with you, Jenny. Can anyone become a designer? And maybe the thing you can focus on. The answer is maybe, right? The answer is maybe. We can't say everybody can because not everybody can. But to you, what were some of those skills that you realized that, can be used and if understood, can help you break into design from programming?
So here's the thing. My take is absolutely everybody's a designer in some capacity, right? Even the smallest task, like you're designing a room, right? Everybody has a peculiar way they set up their room, right? Everybody has a specific way they wear clothes. Like I wear green glasses, green t-shirt, green pants that you can't see. So that's just my way of dressing. That's a monochrome design. So there's a way specifically that I, design my dress, right? And I mean, I
I've
was
got
just
more
like
of
going
the
on.
graphic thing going on. A real quick t-shirt check. Ooh, Sneha's got the 10K designers. They've nagged tea. Yeah, yeah, bro. Go on.
So, in some sense, even if you're like making food, it's a design experience. Everybody's a designer. So the question is not whether everybody is a designer. The question is, can you get paid as a designer? That's a different thing. I mean, can you make it a profession, right? So just because you are designing some element of your life, some things you're painting, you thought you were good in school, the question now becomes is, do you have those skills where companies can hire you now to teach, right? Like we all have those. If you all remember in college and school, we always had that one person who was always the topper, always like getting the highest marks. But if you ask him to explain your concept, he couldn't do it that well. But there was another person who was not the topper or something, but he or she could explain to you in very much like an easy to understand manner. So if let's say we had to bet like who could be a teacher, then that person who's not the topper but can explain very well would be a better fit than the university topper. So same with the designer. I realized that for me, that there are many skills, by the way, that can lend you well in design. I think for me, it was being able to communicate with people and being able to explain with everyone in the room, why are we doing this design? What is the reasoning behind it? Right? So being able to communicate, I realized that I can do that, and that could be a very good skill set transferring. And also because I spend a lot of time in engineering and programming, I realized that there is a approach, like pretty much what engineering is that we look at problem solving, right? We look at coding, we're trying to solve a problem. So I realized that mentality of solving problems and working within constraints can lend really well to design. And in my case, because I worked a lot in B2B companies or big companies, so to speak, your ability to communicate and get along with people matters really, really. It is really important. It's not just about your design skills. You have to be able to get along with people and communicate the idea across. So I think for me, that part played really well in terms of getting in.
Interesting, dude. I find it very similar, which is, I think personally, tools are probably the way to get started, right? But beyond that, I think a lot of design, we might make a separate video about this between art and design, right? The real
Yeah.
difference. But to me, I realized really quick that tools, when I was in that mode, I was making things for myself. And the minute I started making things for other people, whether it was just friends, whether it was somebody who said, oh, I need a logo for my XYZ, the minute I started doing that, I was like, dude, this is a multiplayer activity, in the sense that it's now a matter of, I can't just do what I want. I have to do what the other
Yeah.
person wants. Maybe at some level they have some kind of desires, something they want to fulfill with the product. And then maybe when you're working at a company, it's not just a matter of making screens. That screen fits into this overall app, which fits into this overall workflow that users have, which fits into this
Yeah.
overall business unit that is running, which overall fits into other business units that are coordinating. Designing for others. I want to quickly jump to Sneha, okay? I want to ask you this same question. What is it? Can anybody become a designer? Your answer to that. And then what are those things, what are those areas people should explore if they have a feeling that design is the career they want to get into?
Okay. I mean, for me, the flagship quality of what makes a designer is is empathy. And I think that you said that when you said that your ability to design for others. So if you're able to empathize with another person, put yourself in their shoes. That's what it means to design for them, essentially. At a certain, of course, it starts off with making screens, making posters, whatever. But eventually, you realize that what are you trying to do? You're trying to wear their shoes and see what they're seeing, or feel what they're feeling, or solve their problems and understand their needs. And that's the flagship quality of being a good designer, to be able to empathize. Now, does that mean that everyone can become a designer? No, not everyone has intrinsic empathetic qualities, and not everyone who's empathetic would make a good designer.
Hmm.
But similar to what Jenny said, I do think that design is one of those skills that um, it's how you think. Everyone has design qualities in them, and everyone should cultivate a sense of design, whatever profession they're in. That doesn't mean that they have to be designers or they would be good designers, but design requires a lot of consensus of a lot of different kinds of people to do a good job. So that way, design is for everyone, but everyone cannot necessarily be a designer. So
Hmm.
I would
It's a good
summarize
point.
what I said.
Yeah, that's a good point. One thing I will add to that, one thing that I would like to add is when I, one second. When I look at some of our alumni, right? That's something I think about a lot, which is what backgrounds do they come from, and how does that set them up for success? And one of the reasons that I this thought occurred to me, I saw this comment by Nishra which says, "Can a commerce background person get into design?" Or somebody who's maybe taken commerce in school. And the short answer, Nishra, is absolutely, absolutely, like no doubt. But to give you a longer, more nuanced answer to that, I think the roadmap, connecting this to the previous two sessions, if you've been watching, congrats on keeping your streak up. I'm glad I could keep my streak up as well. If you've been watching, the thing I would want to connect it to is, you remember we talked about how as the scope of options expands, as the internet expands, the new startups being born, the new products being launched, more of our life, we are using products on the internet. Like earlier, you would call someone to order food. Now you just do it via Swiggy. Now your parents want to book something. Do you remember there was a time when um, you could book a flight not online, right? That's so crazy to imagine today. Like a lot of people would want to go to the airport and do it. The point I'm making is, as the internet becomes more prevalent in everyday life, we need more products for it, and that's where designers come in. What's very interesting is that means that the number of paths into design is also expanding because the options are expanding, right? And of course, we talked yesterday about the two paths of degree versus no degree. But over this cohort, we've realized there are people from commerce background, people who used to work in the as BD, right? Business dev, people who used to work in sales. In fact, we don't even think of commerce and science background because um, a good number of people are already in either college or decided not to go to college or doing this with college. But in general, the two types of people we have are people who are just entering the industry and people who sort of been playing around. And the crazy part is the fact that there's such a high demand for designers means that you don't need to come from a very particular background. So at Unacademy, we had about 7 designers, I think. And out of those 7 designers, one was an architect, right, from an architecture background. Somebody from a CS background, that was me. Somebody from an electronics background, right, very similar to Janiels. I think they went to an IIT. Somebody from a CA background who did not get into CA and decided to say, let's go full time with this design thing I've been trying out on the side. Right? A lot of you might know who I'm talking about also, since they're talking about Unacademy design team. We had one or two people from those 7 who did go to design school, but most people were from different fields. So I want to ask you, both of you, this question, either of you, whoever wants to take this up. Being from a different field, like a diverse field that is not really this traditional path that we assume there's one path that exists, but there's multiple. How do you think that affects your process as a designer, coming from a very different background?
Jenny, you want to go first?
Sure. So I think that here's one of the best advice that I've gotten from a very successful designer when I asked him, where should I get design inspiration, right? Where should I, if I'm working on a project and I'm like, I'm stuck, where do I look for? Should I just look at some websites or blogs? And he said, no, go read Harry Potter. And essentially this was like, I was like, what is wrong with you? Why would I read Harry Potter? And then what he was trying to say is, see, when you're like just looking for inspiration in the same field, you think just the same way, how everybody else is thinking. But the true innovation comes when people outside the field who are not used to it, they will question why. Why that way? It cannot be done. But because these people come from the outside background, they have a different way to look at it. Right? A programmer who comes into the design field will have a very different way to look at it. Right? A fashion designer who comes into design field, UX design, for example, she will have a very different way that she looks at design than what me and you would look at it. So it's this diversity that you bring in. And that's why a lot of teams these days, like you talk to an academy team, it's very diverse. And because design is a team sport, all these people coming together with different perspective, that's where, the real magic happens. So I would say that if everyone on the team was just from the same background, like everyone was a CS major, everybody was, let's say, for example, from a design school, then they will have a specific way of thinking. But if they are different, then, and that's where, like, for example, the way I think is going to be very different from the way Sneha is thinking, because she's like, the way she looks at type, right? I mean, I'm like, oh my God, this is so awesome, but I just don't think that way. That's where, her magic comes in.
Yeah. And before I answer that question, I just was thinking about Abhinav, you were talking about the kind of people who are part of the Unacademy team. I hired an intern to be part of my team at Unacademy, who had just graduated school. He didn't even have a college degree, and he didn't know what to do next. And he thought he might want to do design, but wasn't sure, and didn't get into design school the first year that he applied. So he reached out to me, and I saw some of his work. But more than that, I just liked his enthusiasm, his ability to kind of ask for opportunities, take chances. And then he spent 6 months at Unacademy doing an internship. He moved to Bangalore and worked with us. And then after his internship, joined design school because it kind of validated his question about whether he wanted to be a designer. Wow. So I don't think it matters. And as someone, especially as somebody who studied design, I can tell you that even though I paid money to join a design school and study design and become a designer, I would hire people who don't have design backgrounds, who have different varied backgrounds, purely based on their ability and their ideas. Um, so yeah, and I mean, similar to what Jenny has said, design is one of those professions I feel that is never done in isolation unless you're a designer working on like Sigma, which is a design tool. You're very rarely designing for other designers. You're designing for other people, and these people could be any kind of people, and they
It
could
could be
have,
your grandparents using
yeah,
WhatsApp for the first time. It could be your
yeah,
parents who kept asking you, can you order this from me online? Finally, they said, I'm going to do it myself.
yeah,
It could be
yeah,
the person who delivers your Swiggy orders, the Swiggy partner. It could be them having moved to the city now with a smartphone, making their entire living off of this entire Swiggy ecosystem that has been designed in a
yeah,
very specific way. So, great point. Like, the reason we do need diversity when it comes to the kind of people, if you have all people from design school or just people who are computer engineers or just this thing, you miss out on a lot of the outputs, which is you're designing for not one kind of person, you're designing for literally everybody today. 10 years ago,
correct.
most of the time, most of the products people would use would be desktop products, right? And think about how much that cuts down the scope. Like, firstly, you need to have a desktop. Mostly, it's then going to be office or work use, and then it's going to be the couple of hours you use it in a day. And then today, where's my phone? Today, you have this with you all the time. You're not using it in these 2 hour, 3 hour chunks. You're using it in a few minute chunks, right? You're doing a task and then closing it. You're sometimes whatever, doom scrolling, whatever. But the point is, the number of applications has gone crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's only and what you're talking about is largely consumer apps. So they're like people who use consumer products. Then, of course, Jenny will have much more to say about this, which is that there are super niche users that are like B2B users or enterprise products that have very specific needs. They're like maybe only doctors that are trying to use MRI tools, and you have to design interfaces for these MRI tools. And that requires you to be able to think about the doctor and their problems and think about those particular, what are those situations and scenarios like. And at that point, your biggest job, your biggest challenge as a designer is to empathize, is to read and learn as much about that person's job more than your job, and then it makes you do your job better. So yeah,
For sure. For sure. A real quick pause I'm going to give here. Okay. Let's just take a quick short break, folks. Um, let's talk about a little bit. We've talked so far about the roadmap. We've talked about how you don't need to be from a particular type of background, particular type of field. Um, there are multiple paths available. Let's talk about a little bit beyond that. Okay. Let's get into this another level here, which is, it seems like the choice out there today, most people think it's binary or trinary. Binary, let's just say binary for now, which is you either go to a design, you do a course, or you're self taught, right? People here are like, dude, you're promoting your course. Of course, I'm promoting my course, right? Because for a lot of people, that is the best way forward. But for everybody else, you might have a different path that you take, right? You might never enroll in a course. You might just practice by yourself and directly get an internship. Like the person we were talking about, he was probably 16 or 17. Sent a cold email to Sneha saying, yo, I just finished school. Did that internship and then used that for their college application, right? There are people who, not early in their career, but later realize that they've reached some kind of cap, that beyond this, they're not able to grow. So I want both of you to just touch upon this idea. People think it's self-taught versus program, right? Doing the 10K designers cohort, by the way, if you're interested, applications are open. If you're watching this in the future, they might not be open. So just check out our website for more. Do you think it's really that black and white? I want to start with Janil. Do you think it's really that black and white? I did a course or I'm self-taught. Because my opinion is that no matter what you do, you will still have to be self-taught, right? Nobody else can do the teaching for you. What do you think, Janil?
I mean, in a way, that's right. There's going to be a lot of learnings that you're going to have to do on your own. But, when you go through like some kind of structure, right? When you go through some kind of structure, whether it's a self-paced course, whether it's, go through a boot camp, whether you go through like a cohort, each one has its own, like advantages and drawbacks. But the thing is, having some kind of structure helps. It accelerates your path. So basically, let's say if I'm just going to a bookstore and buying all the design books and figuring out and watching YouTube tutorials, the problem there is basically I'm just trying to figure things out. But if somebody was there to tell me, like in college, we had seniors like engineering में ये करना, ये placement में ये करना, ये subject में tension नहीं लेने का, ये professor बहुत chill है. So then you have some kind of guide map. Like, this is what I need to do. And I feel that if you combine both of them, one, like if you have a desire to be self-taught and you combine that with some kind of structure, that's where the real magic happens. Because if you're just going to be learning in isolation, I mean, some people are there, man. Some people are just going to be like so motivated, they don't even need any kind of structure. That's awesome for them. For majority of people like me, a structure helps. For me, social environment helps. Like if Sneha's working on assignment and I'm working on the same assignment and I'm stuck, I can talk to Sneha. And maybe, like if we're in the same cohort, then me and Sneha become lifelong friends. So there's all these other benefits where I realize I'm not the only one. And I feel so lonely. Just like you take a Coursera course or something like that. It's awesome, right? It's cheap. You'll take it. You'll get a certificate at the end, right? But the thing is, when I did that, I actually did that whole experience from Coursera. And the thing was, it was so lonely, man. There were times where I was like, I don't want to do this. I'm so frustrated. I just wanted to binge watch Sacred Games or like whatever other show was going on. And I'm just like, dude, I don't want to do this anymore. And you have to really push yourself to go through. And that's what I think is lacking in a lot of these, like online self-paced courses, watching YouTube videos, is the social component and the motivation. It's not built into that.
Yeah, for sure. So folks, with that, we're going to be wrapping up today's session, right? We have a few more things we want to talk about, but roughly, hopefully that gave you an idea that you don't need to, if you feel, okay, overall, here's my closing thoughts on this. If you feel you cannot become a designer because you come from X background, maybe you're commerce, right? And for some reason you feel, I don't know any commerce people who've done it. You might feel you can't get in. Maybe you're in programming. You're like, programming is a very specific type of thing, but design seems like something totally different. I want to just say, wherever you are, you have to start where you are. You cannot hope for an ideal state which will make it better for you to start, right? And overall, this is what we're hoping to clear with this series. We've said 20 sessions. We might change that based on how this goes. But overall, this is meant to be a career guide, right? This is meant to be a career guide. If you actually want to learn design, you should use the rest of the internet, right? That's something that I have to sometimes verbally and very explicitly tell people, which is, do not assume or wait for a point when you will find the perfect course. You have to start where you are at, right? So hopefully this career guide experience helps you figure some of these things out. But beyond that, right? Beyond that, my recommendations, I'm going to give you 3 recommendations. The first one, as you could have guessed, if you're enrolling in UI UX design, check out the cohort, right? Again, this is not for everybody, but this is a product we've worked very hard on. And if we weren't promoting it, we would be doing ourselves a disservice, right? So check this out. Maybe that's for you. For everybody else who's still not sure about it, who's still not sure about design, I would suggest starting with some of the free resources. You can start with our free resources, right? We have a playlist called something very similar, actually. It's called Design Crash Course / Roadmap. You can start with this, but right, despite the fact that we say, it's a learning social experience and all of this, Udemy, Coursera, a lot of these resources are free. So do check them out, right? That's going to be my closing thoughts to you guys. Thank you all for joining, right? Thank you, Sneha, and thank you, Janil, as well, right? We're going to be doing a couple more sessions on some of these related topics. But for now, see you all later. See you in tomorrow's session at 9 p.m. Namaste.
Namaste.
Have a good evening ahead.